Hello and welcome to Heartlight Vedic Astrology. In today's talk, I was going to cover Nakshatras, or at least do an introduction to Nakshatras, which are also called lunar mansions. And again, this is all based on Vedic astrology or Jyotish. If you're new to Vedic astrology, Jyotish, or my videos, I just want to let you know all of my teaching videos on the subject are in my concepts playlist. And for this video, there are a few you might check out before so you don't get lost. The videos I would watch before this one are Introduction to the Constellations or Rashis, also the Vedas and Vedic Astrology or Jyotish. That's more, it gives more of a historical perspective for Vedic astrology. And then I have a whole playlist on planets and or grahas as they're known of planets or grahas as they're known in Sanskrit, because I do talk about some of the planets a little bit and the symbolism of that. So if you don't know the planets and the symbolism, you might, again, be a little bit lost or confused. So again, just to help you out navigate this video. All right, so what are nakshatras? It's a fairly simple concept. So a nakshatra, it's translated in English as a lunar mansion, so house of the moon, I guess you could say. And actually, nakshatras, as far as Jyotish or Vedic astrology goes, is actually considered the oldest part of Jyotish. And it's actually written about in the Vedas. And so, again, if you're interested in the Vedas, which are these ancient books of written as hymns and they impart culture and wisdom and that sort of thing, I have a whole video on Vedic astrology and the Vedas. So you might look that up. Nakshatras are also called or considered to be star astrology. Because they're more specific indications of constellation or Rashi. So if you look at this picture here, I have a picture of Leo or Simha, as it's known in Sanskrit. And so you can see the full outline of this lion. There are all these little dots and names and things like that. So these are all the different stars that make up Leo. But if we're talking about nakshatras, actually nakshatras are only a part of the constellation. So each constellation has 2.3 nakshatras that make it up. So it's almost like you could very grossly say like about a third or so of the nakshatra, or excuse me, of a constellation is a nakshatra. Okay, so there are 28 nakshatras. And so every day when the moon travels, it travels through one of these nakshatras. So if each constellation is about 2.5, 3 nakshatras, then 12 constellations by 2.3 nakshatras gives you 28. Okay. So again, each constellation is a little bit like less than 2.5 nakshatras. All right. So when the moon passes through all 28 of these nakshatras, that gives you a lunar month, as opposed to a solar month, which changes, right? So some months we have 28 days, and some solar months we have 31 days, and that sort of thing. Okay. And so again, if we look at this picture here of Leo, you can see in the sort of black square there, it says Regulus. Regulus is a star of Leo, and Regulus is considered to be the heart of Leo, heart of the lion. And one of the nakshatras called Maga corresponds with this star. It's actually considered to be the place up in the sky where our ancestors reside. So, so yeah. So again, just a basic notions of what nakshatras are. Okay, so let's sort of a more concept, verbal concept, but let's take a look at a little bit more of a visual concept of nakshatra. So the circle here is meant to represent the 360 degrees of the sky if you look up. Okay. And there are 12 constellations, so you can see that the circle is divided into 12 portions, and each portion is one constellation. Now I've put at the top here Aries, which is the first constellation. And then you can see in this diagram, I go backwards to count the second constellation Taurus, and then the third constellation Gemini, da 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 da. Okay, just so you get a directionality here. Okay, but on the outer edge of the circle, you'll see at the one edge of Aries, it says 1. And then if you go backwards following the blue arrow, it goes 2 and then 3. And you can see the kind of turquoise lines there in this outer portion are divisions. So when I have the turquoise divisions in 1, that's the first nakshatra. And then going backwards, there's the second nakshatra. And then the third nakshatra. Okay, so the first nakshatra starts exactly at the beginning of Aries and it goes along with Aries. Okay, now each nakshatra is 13 degrees and 20 minutes. Okay, the other thing to know is each nakshatra is made of 4 padas or 4 feet. We'll get a little bit more into that, but so again, each constellation is divided up into nakshatras. It's officially 2.3, but it's sort of like 2.5, I was thinking, just loosely in my mind. And then each nakshatra is divided into 4 padas or feet. Okay. Now each pada, so if we take each nakshatra, which is 13 degrees 20 minutes, and we would divide it into 4, that means each pada is 3 degrees and 20 minutes. Okay. But again, in this diagram, I just have the first nakshatra, second nakshatra, and part of the third nakshatra are all in Aries. So it's like 2 and the third. Okay. Nakshatras. Just so you kind of see how the nakshatras line up with the constellations. Okay, now I do have on the side here, on the right side, a note. And I said that there are 28 nakshatras. One of the nakshatras is unusual. It's called Abhijit nakshatra. And it's not a full nakshatra. Like it's not 13 degrees, 20 minutes. It actually lands in Capricorn. And we're talking about, again, sidereal or Vedic astrology Capricorn, not Western astrology Capricorn. And it's only about 1 pada and a fifth. So it's a little bit more than 1 pada. So it's a little bit more than 1/4 of a nakshatra. And it lands in 6 degrees 40 minutes to 10 degrees 53 minutes and 20 seconds of Capricorn. And this nakshatra, Abhijit, actually overlaps with Uttarashada and Shravana nakshatras. So it doesn't have its own specific place on this sort of nakshatra wheel. Okay. The other thing about Abhijit that's unusual is that you only really use it in Muhurta, and Muhurta is also called electional astrology or choosing auspicious dates for big life events, that sort of thing. We don't typically use it in a birth chart readings. So again, more concepts just to kind of build up your idea of what nakshatras are and how they relate to the padas and the constellations. Okay, now I mentioned pada, so now we're going to get into a little bit more. So now we just looked at how the nakshatras line up with the constellations. Now we're looking at how the nakshatras line up with the padas. So here we have the first nakshatra, Ashwini. The other thing to know is that each nakshatra and pada are ruled by different planets or graphs. All right, so again, we have the first nakshatra here, Ashwini. Ashwini is ruled by Ketu, the south node of the moon. And again, the whole nakshatra from beginning to end is 13 degrees 20 minutes. Now, each nakshatra, including Ashwini, is divided into 4 parts, or 4 padas, pada 1, 2, 3, and 4. And each pada is 3 degrees and 20 minutes. The other thing is each pada is ruled by a different planet. Okay, so if the whole nakshatra is ruled by Ketu, padas 1, 2, 3, and 4 of Ashwini, and there are different planets for all the different padas. So it's not like Mars is going to be the ruler of each first pada of each nakshatra. It's just an Ashwini. Pada 1 is ruled by Mars, Pada 2 is ruled by Venus, Pada 3 is ruled by Mercury, and Pada 4 is ruled by Moon. Okay, so if we say the ruling planet of Ashwini is Ketu, then we would say the ruling planet of Pada 1 in Ashwini is Mars. And if you know the different the symbolism of each planet, you start to understand the energy of each nakshatra and also the padas within each nakshatra. So Ketu, for example, is a separatist, unusual planet, a very fiery planet. Um, and so Ashwini is somebody who has a lot of get up and go. They're usually like a leader or pioneer, that sort of thing. So they're blazing their own trail. Um, and then if we look at Pada 1, ruled by Mars, Mars is a planet that's ruled by, is another fiery planet that's also like a leadership planet and a rebellious planet, and that sort of thing. So it kind of, this K2 Mars energy, if you combine the two, the planet rulership of the nakshatra with the planet rulership of the pada, that first pada, if you have a planet or like your lugna, your rising sign, your first house, ascendant, these are all different, these are the same thing, lands in the first pada of Ashwini Nakshatra, you're going to be a fiery go-getter type, yeah, pioneer typically. Again, depending on which planet, or if it's your lugna, what's landing here, but that's typically the energy here. And then you can compare that with Pada 2. So Pada 2 is ruled by Venus. Venus is the planet that symbolizes things like socializing and the finer things of life and luxury and love and romance and that sort of thing. So, whereas the first Pada, ruled by Mars and Ashwini, um, is very fiery, go-getter, pioneer type energy, and perhaps even like separatists, like people are so fired up about their their cause, their special cause, or their whatever they're into, they might just be off and running on their own, almost like a Lone Ranger type. If you have a planet or your lugna lands in Pada 2 of Ashwini Nakshatra, you're going to have more Venusian energy combined with K2. So K2 again is a fiery, separatist, unusual planet. It can also represent things like foreigners. Um, and Venus, again, being the planet representing like sociability, love, romance, fire things, this is going to be a lot more of a romantic type of blending with K2. And so here you would get somebody who is pioneer but more romantic about it. So you might get somebody who's like very much like the hero type. He's like trying to save the world and help people. And it's not that Mars can't do that, but Mars is again more fiery and it can be a little bit more again ego based and also separatist and more of a fighter energy versus Venus, which is more of like the lover energy, right? So that's how the nakshatras line up with the padas and how the different levels of planet rulerships you can blend together to get meaning when you're looking at charts. And then here are all 28 nakshatras in order, 1 through 28, and their names and their symbols. So they each have a symbol. And they have a lot more, uh, you know, um, precise information about their energies and stuff, but I thought just as an intro to the nakshatras, order the names and the symbols are a good start. So let's just go through. So the first one's Ashwini I mentioned, and the symbol of Ashwini is the Kumara twins, who are the celestial healers. So again, there's a lot of healing energy, and they tend to ride around horses. So again, there's this kind of rush to save typically. Again, depending on which planet's landing here, if your Lagna's landing here. The second nakshatra is Bharani. The symbol of that is womb. So again, life and death. It's fairly dramatic energy here of life and death issues. The third nakshatra is Kritika. The symbol here is a knife. So there's a lot of kind of sharpness, like things that use sharp tools, like a knife specifically, like the symbol itself, or it could even be something like a pen. So writing and stuff like that can come from this nakshatra. Number 4 is Rohini. The symbol here is a cart. And Rohini is a very lush, abundant type of nakshatra. And so a cart, you fill up your cart with whatever. I mean, anything, right? Vegetables, fruits, friends, all good things in life. Number 5 is Mrigashirsha. The symbol here is the deer's head. And deer, Mrigashirsha is the nakshatra of seeking. And so if you consider like in many folklores, like not just in India, but around the world, there's a lot of like fairy tales and stuff where like some deer shows up in the woods and leads you through the dark path, or the darkness of the forest to find your way. So it's a nakshatra of seeking. Number 6 is Ardra. Ardra is symbolized by a drop of water, and this drop of water can be a drop of water from a storm. This is a very stormy type of electric type of nakshatra. It could also be a drop of your tears. So there can be sadness associated with this nakshatra. Number 7 is Punarvasi. The symbol of this is a quiver of arrows. Quiver of arrows, again, there's a sharpness from the arrows, but there's usually this energy of like going out and coming back home, going out and coming back home, like the arrows who come back to the quiver. Number 8 is Pusha. The symbol here is of a cow's udder. So it's a very nourishing, gentle, stabilizing type of energy. I always tend to think of Kobe beef when I think of Pusha. I'm not exactly sure why, but it's like, those Japanese cattle who are like, they're massaged and they're fed sake, and that's so they have a very good life to make their meat very marbleized, I think, with fat, but also like relaxed. I think that's why they do that with the cows. But anyway, it's like very luxurious, supportive type of energy for some reason. Except the Kobe beef actually are turned into steaks for people, right? So maybe even in that, in the whole cycle, like maybe they're supporting people that way. Number 9 is a shlesha. The symbol here is a snake, so there can be a lot of it can go two ways with the snake, again, depending on what planet is here, but it can be deviousness, biting, hissing, a bit of a fighter type thing, but it can also be like healing energy, like medicine. Number 10 is Maga. The symbol here is throne. I mentioned that when we were looking at the Leo picture. So again, this is kind of royalty, but also tradition. And again, this is where ancestors are thought to reside when they pass on. Number 11 and 12 are similar in some ways of their symbolism. So there's Purva Falguni and then there's Uttara Falguni. And for number 11, Purva Falguni, the symbol is the front legs of a bed. It can also be a hammock. And for 12, Uttara Falguni, it's the back legs of the bed and also a hammock. And both of them have the energy of like enjoyment, fun, socializing, finer things of life. The difference being that Uttara Falguni also has this added notion of mission and purpose. So, yeah. Number 13 is Hasta. The symbol here is a hand. And so, again, depending on what planets are here, it's usually a very hands on type of practical type of energy. It can also be kind of grabby, depending again on what planet's here. Number 14 is Chitra. The symbol here is the gemstone. And just like the gemstone, if it's a cut gemstone, has these different facets to it, and there's a specific structure to it. Chitra can symbolize things that have structure. And the deity, I didn't list the deities here, but the deity of Chitra is the celestial architect. So you can think of, again, building and construction, that sort of thing here. Number 15 nakshatra is Swati. The symbolism here is new grass and wind. Typically, I find when there are planets or lugna in this nakshatra, there's a lot of nervous energy, like, again, new grass blowing in the wind. There's a lot of restlessness or nervousness there. Fragility, at least, again, depending on what planets are there and what else might be supporting. Number 16 is Vishaka, which the symbol of this is either a victory gate or a pottery wheel. And it's also sort of related to 17 Anuradha, which is a victory gate or lotus flower. They're both nakshatras that indicate victory, but The difference being that Vishaka is kind of a win at all costs. So people might end up burning bridges, and upsetting people because they just want to win and they don't really care what happens to other people. Typically, and Anurata is the opposite, where it's like people win by building bridges with people and gathering people and creating alliances and that sort of thing. So different shades of victory. Number 18 is Chesta. The symbolism here is the talisman. And it can kind of go either way. It can, like a talisman, if you really think of it sort of old school style, is an amulet, like a protective amulet. So you can't get people here because this nakshatra is in Scorpio, which is a very transformative constellation. The talisman can bring out, again, depending on what planets are here, um, um, it can bring out more of this energy of like a spiritual protection, somebody who's interested in spiritual development, that sort of thing. But it can also be things like I almost think of like a cop's shield, the badge that they carry on their on their person typically, because that's also another kind of it protects them and their identity, but they're also the protector, right? So number 19 is Mula. This is the symbol here is a bunch of roots tied together. And Mula is actually usually indicates things like depth and destruction because it's things that are underground, where things are turning over. Yeah. I mean, even when you're seed, right? When the seed is becoming a plant, its initial form of the seed gets destroyed so it can become a plant and develop like a stem and leaves and flowers or fruits or whatever it's going to turn into. Number 20 is Purvashada. The symbol here is a winnowing basket. So that's a basket that they use to kind of shake wheat to get the husks off there. So there's sort of like churning um, notion of Purvashada. There's Uttarashada as well, number 21, and the symbol here is an elephant tusk. So this is also a nakshatra that typically symbolizes things that are victorious and like a sharp victory, like an elephant tusk. 22 Abhijit. So this is the unusual one I mentioned. The symbolism here is a horse's head, and Abhijit is like the ultimate kind of victory, like victory out of nowhere type thing. So maybe that's why it's used in Muhurta. I'm not sure about why it's only used in Muhurta, but there you go. Number 23, Nakshatra Shravana. The symbolism here is 3 footprints. So this nakshatra, sometimes I also think of an ear as a symbolism here, but it can be things like music and oral traditions and erudition. So education, especially of like spiritual things and long-standing tradition. Number 24, Dhanishta. The symbolism here is a drum. And often when I find planets in Dhanishta, somebody's interested in music. Um, but it's about rhythm, even if it's not music specifically, it's about rhythm and that sort of thing. 25 is Shatabisha. The symbolism here is an empty circle. And Shatabisha can be translated as 100 healers. And so often I think of sorts of, either healers that are good at healing things that are difficult to heal or diseases, again, depending on what planets are here that are can be difficult to heal, conditions that are difficult to remedy. Nakshatra number 26 is Purva Bhadrapada, and number 27 is Uttar Bhadrapada. So again, Purva is front, Uttar means back, and we're talking here, instead of Purva Falguni and Uttar Falguni, which are the front and back legs of the bed, now we're talking about the front or back legs of a funeral pyre. So both of these have this transmutation energy um, of fire and cremation and things like that, um, which is a really intense type of transformation. But also, it can also, especially with Uttara Bhadrapada, it can mean things like liberation. And so you might get people who are like renunciates or monks or something like that associated with these because it's like they're just sort of burning away. They have a lot of energy or motivation to burn away like things in the material world that they don't really need. They only keep the things that are serving them and others. Yeah. Otherwise, they want to release their attachments. And then the last one here, number 28, is Revati. And the symbolism here is a pair of fish, usually. Revati is a very, usually very gentle energy, high-minded, but it's also typically, it can symbolize things like travel, but also a completion because it's the very last nakshatra of the very last constellation. Yeah. So again, just a general energy profile of each nakshatra, and now you know the nakshatra names and the order and the basic symbols. So this can potentially help you if you hear about nakshatras or you're looking at charts, you're listening to people like me who go through charts. So there you go. So there you go, an intro to nakshatras. I hope you found this interesting, helpful as always. I always appreciate you listening and supporting my work through watching videos and um, liking and subscribing and sending in donations and kind comments. It's really means a lot to get that kind of feedback. So thank you for that. Again, all of my teaching videos on Vedic astrology are in my concepts playlist. You can find them all there. Also, if you're interested in a personal birth chart reading, I do them on Zoom. If that's of interest, you can email heartlightastro@yahoo.com. Also have another YouTube channel on natural medicine that includes other Vedic arts such as Ayurveda and yoga, as well as homeopathy and naturopathic medicine. And the name of that channel is Nature Source Care, so that might be of interest as well. Again, I hope you use this energy well as you navigate the energy cycles of your life. Okay. Until the next one, take care. Namaste.